you doing? Today I'm going to show you how to install an Underpressure twin turbo kit for the 05-06 Pontiac GTO. First, what we're going to do is start off by removing the battery, this front plastic fascia here, the air box, and both manifolds on both sides. While I'm doing that, Robert's going to go ahead and disconnect the exhaust that's attached to the manifolds from the bottom side. So first thing you want to do is going to take the battery out of here and disconnect the electrical system. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to have to modify some of the coolant system. So what we're going to need to do first is drain the coolant. There's a pit cock on the driver's side on the lower part of the radiator. Just open that up. Next, to relieve the pressure, you can actually take the radiator cap off as well. Now, as you can see, we removed the factory air box and the factory air tube, but you're going to want to keep the mass air meter still in the car. That part is going to stay with the car here. We'll put that back in when we go to do our intercooler piping. We'll also move the battery and the battery box. That's going to free up the room that we need for where the turbos go. As you can see, the front bumper is also removed. We kind of cheated on this one because the front bumper for this particular car is out being painted at the moment. But you will need to remove the front bumper when we go to do the intercooler install. Alright, well, Robert finishes up down below installing or taking off the exhaust. I'm going to go ahead and start removing the headers. What we need to do first is pull off the spark plug wires and set them aside. Now the dipstick is also in the way, so you're going to have to go ahead and remove that. It's just one bolt holding that on. And then after you remove the bolt, it slips right out. So go ahead and remove the factory manifolds and just set those aside. Now you are going to want to retain your factory bolts and the gaskets that came with it. We are going to be reusing those again when we attach the other manifolds. And that's it there, the second manifold's out. The downpipe is going to pass right across here in these two coolant lines. So what we're going to need to do is actually relocate these 90-degree elbow fittings here. And what that's going to allow us to do is actually curl it completely out of the way like this. Now what we're actually going to do is just go ahead and pull off the entire line here and replace it with this. Now you have a short section, then your 90-degree fitting, and then the long section is going to go back and plug into this module back here where we're going to actually disconnect it from. Now we're going to remove these lines here, and these are the ones that we're going to replace. And you want to be careful when you're removing these from back here, because this is plastic, and if it's heated up over time, they have a tendency to break. And you're just going to go ahead and remove that completely. But go ahead and pull the hose clamps off, because we're going to reuse those here in just a second. Alright, so you're going to install the short section here with the 90-degree fitting. What that's going to do is that's going to loop the hose around, and we're actually going to come in like this and reattach it back to where it goes. Now, the hoses are the same size, so it takes a little bit to get it over this bigger fitting here, but it does fit. The reason for that is both of these are the same size back here, and you can't really adapt it in the middle. So we're going to go ahead and stick this on here. Now, we ship the hose a little bit long, so as you get it in there and you get it lined up, go ahead and just cut it to fit. That way you've got the exact length that you need. But you're going to come down, loop down around here into where your battery area used to be, and try and keep it as low as possible, because right in here is where the turbo is going to sit. If you can manage to get it in this channel here, that's about perfect where we want. And it is going to come up further because it's going to allow room for our coolant, or our oil return rather, to drip down there. And should look just like that when you're done with it, sitting down as low as possible. And we can even go ahead and run a zip tie around this here, which is going to kind of clamp it and make sure it holds it down. The next thing we're going to do is start on the battery relocation. Right now, from the battery that normally sits here, you have a power wire that goes over, feeds the fuse box here, and a power wire that goes down to feed the starter. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this 10mm nut off from right here. That frees up this power wire, and you should be able to slide it right off. And then the other one is the one that goes directly down to the starter. We're going to go ahead and disconnect that from down below as well. Now this wire here, you can pretty much just take it and zip tie it up out of the way, bury it down in here. You can cut it out, completely out if you want. If you leave it in here, it'll make it, if you ever decide to switch it back to stock, the wiring is basically completely untouched. It's already in there, you just wire it back the way it goes. Now what we need to do is install the fittings like these. So basically what you want to start off with is slide the little rubber over the end of it, using a razor blade, cut off the end and expose the wire. Pretty simple, straightforward stuff. And then just install your crimp connector and crush it down. Once you got it on there nice and tight, then just pull and slide the rubber protector right back up over it, and that kind of holds everything together, and in case there's any little stray wires, takes care of those. Now, like I said, this one here is basically going to extend a daisy chain from the starter up to here, so we can go ahead and slide it right up into its place using the original factory nut here. Put it right back on. Now for the wire itself, we're going to want to tuck this down, and we made it long enough that you actually kind of follow in the channelway, the same place that we're going with our coolant lines here, to keep it nice and tucked up out of the way. So you're going to follow in the channelway. You're going to go all the way back to the very back of the firewall here and loop around there. That way you're actually going to be on, when the downpipe goes in and through there, it'll actually be sitting on top of the downpipe. So it's actually going to curl around all the way like that on the firewall, and then we can zip tie it to the brake lines and the other hoses and stuff that are down there to keep it up out of the way and keep it off of the downpipe. And that's kind of what it should look like once you're installed with it. Make sure it's all tucked up away. You want to tuck all these wires down here, keep them out of the way as much as possible, and we're going to go ahead and throw some zip ties in them just to hold them tightly out of the way, so that way they're staying away from the heat from the turbo. Alright, now we're looking at the starter from underneath the car. Sorry the video's a little bit fuzzy. We're kind of close up on this one, but if you could see, what we did is we had attached it to the top terminal post here on the starter. That's our first one, and the wire is going to be the one coming down from up top. The second wire is actually going to be right here. It's going towards the back of the car. That's where we're going to relocate our battery. Basically, you just bolt the two of them there. That way the power gets daisy chained from the battery in the back to the starter, and from the starter up to the fuse box, so both are supplied with power. That also gives a direct line of power directly to the starter from the battery without any interruptions in the way. Zip tie them together back in here, just kind of clean it up. That way there's plenty of room right in this area here where the downpipe's going to end up coming through. As you can see, right through this area is where our downpipe's going to come. So we want the wires to coil back, again, by the firewall, just like we did. And then there is the bracket brace going right across here. We want to go actually through that, and then we're going to tie this up here along down with our brake lines and basically follow it to the back of the car where we're going to mount our battery in the trunk. Now for the battery install, you're simply going to mount your battery in the battery box in the trunk here. If you got stereo equipment, stuff like that, there should be enough slack on the line. You can basically move it and mount it wherever you want. The battery box install is pretty simple. Just follow the instructions that came with the battery kit. Basically just drill a couple holes, you mount the box. Now our kit does come with the extended lines and the battery terminal. The one that we attach to the starter up front is going to, of course, come back here, attach your terminal to it, and mount it to the positive. The negative is going to be the shorter of the cables, and that's basically just going to go out through the bottom floorboard here and attach it anywhere on the frame. You are going to want to make sure you grind the frame and clean it really well. That way you've got a really good ground on there. Otherwise it does inhibit problems occasionally, especially when it's cold out, where it'll crank real slow instead of just firing up like it's supposed to. So make sure your terminals are really clean and that you've got a really good ground on it. Alright, next thing we're going to have to do is actually disconnect the power wire here coming from the starter. And again, same thing we did on the battery, just let it dangle and get it out of the way. You can wrap it up with tape, but since none of the wires on that actual line are going to be connected, it's just kind of sitting dormant. We're going to connect one of the ends of the 3-foot section of power wire now to this alternator here itself, to the power post on the alternator. And you're going to run that down and up under, behind the oil pan and across the subframe bar, up to right here. And you're going to run that up to the back side of the starter. We're going to go with that to the exact same terminal post on the starter that we went to with the wire from the battery and the wire from the fuse box location. Okay, now what you first want to do is you're going to test fit your manifold up in here. And you'll notice that it's going to be really close to this support member here. Now, since the GTOs were all built very differently, and there's adjustability with the carriage frame on the bottom, each one's going to be slightly different. Just kind of look and pay particular attention to the back edge here and see if there's enough clearance room between the manifold. And again, like I said, not all the GTOs you're going to need to do this on, but this is basically what we trimmed out of there, and you have about a ½ inch piece there, just to give us a little bit extra clearance room. This one wasn't touching, but it was close enough that if the engine rocks enough, it could start to vibrate and bounce against it. So we just went ahead and preemptively cut that out of the way. Alright, for reinstalling the manifolds, you want to take a look at your factory existing gaskets. Make sure that they're clean, they're not all corroded, and that they don't have any holes in them. If they do, you can either replace them with another set of factory ones, or you can just ditch them all together. Most of the time we prefer to just ditch the gaskets. We don't actually use them. Instead, you use silicone. It's not your regular RTV that you use for doing gaskets and that sort of thing. It's actually just caulking from Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever. It's 100% silicone. That has to be 100% silicone. You can't have any other additives or anything in it. The reason is it's made of silica sand. It's actually got a higher melting point than half the stuff. Now, on all of our drag cars and race cars and stuff, that's what we use. We generally don't use the gaskets because oftentimes the heat and pressure from the turbos will actually be too much for the gaskets and it just blows them out. So if you do use a gasket and you ever experience that problem, by all means chuck the gasket away, switch it over, and just use a light coating of silicone. All you're going to do is on the manifold side, you just put a light layer around each of the cylinders, and that'll seal it up. Okay, so these are the manifolds that we're going to be installing. Now normally they'd sit, and this would be on the passenger side with the exhaust facing down. These are actually off of the Chevy trucks. What we're actually going to do is flip it upside down and be facing forward and up. Alright, next up what we're going to do is install the dipstick. Now the dipstick's going to go back in the same place it was before. It's going to go between runners 1 and 2 on this side of the manifold, and it'll squeeze in there. We've already got it actually back down in, and it'll fit just like it was from the factory. The factory bolt will actually still fit in there. It's kind of a tight squeeze. You're going to have to reach up under the manifold here to get it started and get it threaded, but it'll bolt back in using the same factory bolt in the same location.
Okay.
Alright, this here is the turbo. Now we're shipping these out with the filter elements on it just to make it a little bit easier. But just so you know how it's assembled, so when you go to clean the filters and that over time, basically it's a double layer screen in a crisscross pattern underneath with the foam filter element on the top. Because of its room limitations, there's not a lot of room to put a traditional air filter on there. If you do going down and drag racing it and things like that, you can actually run it without the foam element on there. It'll flow a little bit better, but keep the screens in place. But like I said, it's just a double up screen with the foam filter over the top of it. Now it's easiest to go ahead and assemble the whole turbo assembly before we put it in there. So what you're going to do is the 5-bolt flange here, or for the guys running the staged upgrade, it's going to actually only be a 4-bolt flange, but it adapts it to the V-band clamp. Go ahead and bolt that on. Now, we don't provide gaskets with this. Again, we recommend using the silicone. It provides a much better seal. The same thing with the T3 surface here, and the mounting plate where we're going to mount our up pipes to there. And what you want to do first is we're going to need to clock the turbo. So all of the 6 of these bolts on the compressor side, and then there's another 6 again right here on the turbine side, need to be loosened up. That way this can spin freely and the compressor housing here can spin freely. What that's going to allow us to do is get it into the right position when we put it in there and get the oil alignment lined up so we have the oil draining out properly. We have the compressor spout spitting out in the correct direction. It's also easiest right now to install the oil returns, which is going to be the plate here and then the fitting threaded into it. The fittings will come installed, but they're actually going to be left a little bit loose because you will need to move them around slightly once you get it in there. But you're going to bolt with the 2 Allen bolts here, mounts the plate up to it. Then this one threads in, and you're going to actually end up backing it off just a hair and covering up over that one there. It's also easiest while you have it out now to just install the oil line that mates to it. So you want to thread this on and tighten it down. The room's a little bit restrictive in there once you get it installed. We're also going to go ahead and install it to the up pipe right now, which the up pipe is going to be the connecting pipe between the manifold and the turbo itself. That way we install it all as one assembly and one unit into there. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to actually mock this up in here, and we're going to get the clocking on the turbo correct. With the clocking, again, is where you can rotate the center section and the compressor separate from the turbine housing itself. We have it in there kind of where you want it now. Basically, with the oil line attached to it, you want to make sure that it's got clearance room from the bottom of the frame rail here, but at the same time you want to make sure that it's not pointed up at all. The oil return directly in, the oil return directly out, completely vertical at the bottom as much so as you can. If you need to cock it just a couple degrees, you know, here or there, that's no big deal. Next is going to be the actual compressor housing itself. Now the compressor housing, you want it pointed down because our intercooler piping is going to be going through this opening right here just below the headlight. So we want to kind of point it down at a 45-degree angle. Once you do that, you're going to lock one bolt on each the compressor and the turbine down, and this is going to hold our position for us. So that one's locked in place, and then we'll just pick 2 of the bolts that are just easiest to access. Bam, just like that. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is actually remove it, pull the thing back out, and then we're going to tighten up all the bolts. That way it's all completely together as one unit, and the clocking of the turbo is essentially done. Alright, now we've got the turbo all prepped and ready to go in. The last thing that we're going to need to install on here before we put it in is going to be the bracket. Now the larger of the 2 brackets goes on the passenger side. The way this goes is it basically sits, as the turbo sits in there, between the 5-bolt flange, the bottommost bolt here, and then it's going to actually come around and sit on the top side of this here. And what this is, it's an extra support bracket to help take some of the weight of the turbo off of the up pipe itself. So both of these bolts you're going to, or this bolt here, you're going to want to put in there somewhat loose. That way you have some free play. Just get the threads started on it. You'll be able to tighten it up once it gets in there, and then it should line up with the bottom hole here. Now as you're doing this, the bottom bolt is actually underneath the up pipe, so you're going to have to lift up slightly on the up pipe and install that nut first and get it started going down on there. And then the remaining 2 nuts. Now these are M10 by 1.5 thread gauge. You'll notice you do have a little bit of playroom in there, so you can move it around and kind of get it positioned right exactly where you need it. Now when you get done, the bracket should be going between that lower bolt there and actually the lower bolt right down there on the turbo. And again, that's just going to help support it give it some additional support so that all the weight's not carried by the up pipe here. And it basically just goes right up between those 2. And that's pretty much what the turbo should look like once you get it fully installed. Again, you have the oil fittings facing up and down, the oil line coming off here, and just sitting, going right across the front where the radiator goes, and then the snout for the compressor just facing kind of at a 45-degree angle down right here. because we're going to aim for right there when we go with our intercooler piping. Alright, now we're ready to put the driver's side turbo in here. As you can see, we did pretty much the same thing as the last one. We set it in there, mocked it up in place. We got the clocking on the turbo, so that way it's going to be coming out pretty much like this at a horizontal comparative to going in. The oil line feed is on top, the oil line return is on bottom. We got the short oil feed line with the 2 straights already attached to it, tightened down, ready to go. Everything's all clocked in, and then of course the last is going to be this bracket here. Now this bracket is the shorter of the 2 brackets, and it will actually go to the top bolt on the 5-volt flange and to the bottom bolt on the inside flat edge here, and it will bolt up when we bolt it in there. Now just go ahead and smear a light layer of silicone around there, and we'll mount this one in next. Alright, now the second driver's side turbo here is installed. As you can see, the oil flange facing up, the oil return going out and down, and right now it's just kind of hanging, going right in front of the radiator, the same with the other one over on the passenger, or the passenger side over there. And then the output for the turbo is just kind of facing horizontal there, because we are going to be aiming for that hole right there as we're going with our intercooler piping. Okay, next up what we're going to be doing is the oil line return fitting install. Now you should have your one from your passenger side here, and then the one from the driver's side is hanging here straight down. I'll show you that in just a minute. What we're essentially going to do is we're going to use our -10AN T fitting and tee them together. The last line that's going to go to our pump, which our pump's going to be mounted right here, is just going to be this little short guy here, and it's going to come over and essentially run to our pump. Okay, here you can see the T fitting. Now we have the driver's side, or the passenger side line rather, coming from over there from the passenger side turbo. It just comes down right in front of the radiator, comes across, and straight to this T fitting here. Then if we look directly up, we have the oil line here. Sorry, again, it's kind of fuzzy. We're a little bit close up on this. Coming directly from that turbo there. Now one thing you're going to want to make sure of is that you don't kink this line as it crests across here, right here. There is a 90-degree fitting coming straight off the turbo, which produces it horizontal, and it's going to go back again vertical, but you should have more than enough hose that you get a nice smooth radius going across here, and it doesn't actually kink. If you do kink it, it can ruin the hose, and it will also back the oil line up into the turbo, causing it to smoke significantly. Now, for us to mount our oil return pump, this horn assembly here is going to actually have to be relocated. It's in the way, so we're going to go ahead and pull it off. Now again, we did this oil relocation pump for installation ease. It makes it a lot easier than doing a gravity feed and draining it back into the pan. However, the turbos are mounted high enough, you could run it back into the pan if you so choose to, if you just want to eliminate the pump altogether. Basically, you just tee them together, and off the tee, you run your third line over, which taps in and drains right into the pan itself. It makes it much quicker and easier to install, and much easier to convert it back to stock if you ever later choose to, if we do it with the oil return pump. So we're going to pull the horn off right now and just set it aside. We'll come back to that later. And this here is our oil return pump. This is a Turbo Works oil scavenging pump. It's specifically designed and built just for this. Now if you look at it, going in, it has the in and out clearly marked. The in is going to be a -10AN, that's your bigger fitting. The out is going to be a -6 fitting. Okay, so now what we're going to do is install the pump itself. Now the shorter line here goes in, and the 45-degree angle goes towards your T fitting. The 90-degree is going to go right here on the end, towards the pump itself. When we mount the pump in there, we want the 90-degree fitting to be essentially facing just like that, and the pump is going to be pumping vertically up into it. Now these are the mounting feet here, so what we're going to do is mark off where those mounting feet meet and where they touch up, and then we're going to go ahead and drill a hole there so we can put our nut and bolt on to hold this thing in place. Now to mount our pump, what we're going to do is we're going to stick our M6 by 40mm bolts through the frame rail here, and then we're going to attach the pump right up onto it. Again, the fittings for the last line there are still kind of loose. We want to have some playroom in here, which you kind of want to know where it lines up until we get this thing bolted up and tied on. Next, you're going to install your washers to go over that, and your nuts to hold everything securely. Now occasionally you will hear these pumps running, especially when it's cold out when you first start it up in the morning. You'll hear it for about the first 5 or so minutes until the oil warms up and it becomes a little bit more fluid-like. Then it flows through it a little bit easier. That noise that you hear is completely normal. Okay, you can see we got our 2 bolts installed, going through the frame and coming up to just inside that frame rail there. The oil line, again the 90-degree fitting, is connected to the pump. The 45-degree fitting is going to be connected over there to the T-fitting. Now we'll go ahead and snug those up, make sure all of these are good and tight. Okay, now that we've got the pump installed, we're going to take the wiring here and we're going to go right up just in behind the turn signal here and pull all of our slack right up through the top, because we're going to be doing our electrical wiring of the relay up in there later. And that's basically what it should look like for the time being. Okay, next up we need to do for the oil return line is we're going to drill right into the oil cap. We've actually got a replacement oil cap for this one here because this kit's not going to be on there for very long. And again, we tried to design the kits so it's really easy to replace it and go back to factory should you choose to later. Basically you have to buy a $5 oil cap. What you're going to do is drill it and tap it right in the center of your oil cap, right in the very middle with a 1/4 inch pipe thread. Okay, now that we've got the hole drilled in our oil cap, we're going to go ahead and install the 90-degree 6AN to 1/4 inch fitting, and then that will just sit right back in where our oil cap goes. Make sure the fitting is facing forward on this. Last up is going to be our 6AN line. Now the 45-degree fitting is going to go on the pump side, and the straight one goes up here on the oil cap side. Now we're going to align the 6AN fitting on the 45 on the 6AN so it comes off and goes forward. This is essentially going to go right under your headlight housing here. It'll come up behind the radiator. Right here, and plug basically directly into your oil return housing. Okay, now this is the wiring from the oil return pump, and basically we just stretch it right across the front in front of the radiator. It's going to be hidden all by the plastic cover that we're going to put back on here. And we'll bring it over here to the passenger side, because over here we have our electrical from our fuse box, we have a nice ground to go to right here, and we've got enough room that we can mount the relay right up on here. And your oil return pump will come with these connectors. Basically one's a male, one's a female. This side's already been assembled, and you just slide lock these two into place, and then they should come up inside of there like that. Then the bottom will click down over it. Now also you've got another connector that actually, the male, that plugs into there, and then the terminals that go along with it, as well as the rubber bushings. So what we're going to do is make another connector to come out of there. Now just pay attention to the polarity on it, because red of course is positive and black is negative. So when you insert your 2 wires into here, you want to pay attention as to which one you're inserting so that they can mate up with it. The black will just go to ground, the red will go to our relay. Okay, so to make our connector, what you're going to do is you're going to take your length of wire. This one's going to be our ground, so we're going to measure it from there to there and cut it. Slide your rubber water protector on first. Then you're going to use the male connector here, and the wire basically slides in there, and then we're going to crimp it down and hold it with the little tabs that are on here. And when you get done, it should look something like that. Make sure it's nice and snug on there, it's not going to come off. Now align your plug with here. Like I said, this one is going to be our ground wire, so we're going to want to do it on this side to mate up with the black wire. And this will just slide in there until you feel it click. And then you slide the rubber water protector up in there. And when we get done doing the other wire, again, just like the other one, this will actually fold right over and cover it up and lock everything in there. Alright, so right in this corner here, we've wired up and mounted our relay. Now our power source is going to come from the fuse box here. You can tap it in basically anything that's fused, or if you want, you can tap it into right where we did the post on the side there where we installed the battery, main power wire coming from the battery. If you do that, just make sure you use an inline fuse. Our ground location for both the pump and the relay is going to be here. We're taking our output, of course, goes to the pump to run it from the relay. And then our trigger source is actually going to be the ignition source on the fuel injector wire. Make sure you're tapping the correct wire on the fuel injector. It needs to be the plus 12 volts with it disconnected. That's the, I'm going to focus there. That's going to trigger, that's going to be the ignition on. So basically every time the ignition's on, it runs the oil pump continuously as long as it sees an ignition signal. Next step, we're going to install the dowmpipes on it. Now, the one that's real simple and it's just 245-degree angles, that goes on the passenger side. The one with the more complex bends actually will go on the driver's side because it's shifting around the steering rack. Go ahead and install the O2 sensor before you start. Makes it a little bit easier when you get it up in there. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is slide the downpipe, or have somebody else slide the downpipe up from the bottom so it mates right here. Now, the O2 sensor is going to face more towards the rear section, of course. Slide your V-band clamp on it. It's usually easiest to initially take off the nut. Now, when you get done with the pipe install, you should have plenty of clearance room on these two heater core hoses going back there. You also want to make sure that you pull the ground wires and straps and make sure that they're clear and they're not touching. As long as they have a little bit of gap on them, it should be good. Again, with your power wires, same thing. You want to make sure where it goes down and comes out, it's not too close to the exhaust piping there. Okay, next step, we're going to do the driver's side. Again, same thing. Just slide it up from the bottom. Tiny's down there. He's going to feed it up to me. Let's set it into place right here, and then get our V-band clamp ready. And now, as you can see, the second downpipe is installed. Make sure it's clearancing everything. You got enough room where it goes around the steering rack down there. And again, on the bottom side, which we'll see a little bit later when we do the rest of the exhaust, it should come out pretty level. Now, next up, we're going to mount both the wastegates. The wastegate assemblies, this is the dump tube coming off of it. This is going to be for the driver's side. It's the longer bend. Use a little bit of silicone. The two Allen head bolts that bolted up right there, and that's essentially it. Now, on the bottom side, you'll notice there's a ring cut out, and in the box, the wastegate is what's called a fire ring. The fire ring does have to be in there or it will not seal. So then you're going to want to use, again, a little bit of silicone on the bottom of it there, and the fire ring with the actual flare goes up inside of it there, and it should stick out and protrude when you look at it just a hair below it. As you tighten this up, that's going to put our tension against the diaphragm and the base piston of the wastegate itself, and that's what's going to seal it. So it should stick out just a hair like that, and we're going to use just a little bit of silicone to seal this up, and we'll go ahead and install it. I'm going to put just a real thin light layer of silicone on there again. Make sure it doesn't get up inside the valve because we don't want to inhibit the valve movement at all in any way. And then make sure the fire ring stays in there, and just slide this guy right on. Again, that fire ring is going to be sticking out, so you can see it's not mating completely flush at the moment. And as we tighten it up, it will pull that down and actually push the fire ring up against the diaphragm. That's what is going to seal it and keep the wastegate boost from leaking out of there. Now we also prep these wastegates in advance. One thing we didn't show is actually going to be the two nipples here with the 10mm banjo bolt that goes through them. If you look, there's actually an aluminum washer on the bottom and then the aluminum crush washer on the top, and that's going to be for both of these. The one that's really important that you're going to generally need the most is going to be this one here. If you're wanting just direct base wastegate pressure, we're going to go and we'll hook that up next. It's going to be the nipple down here on the turbo itself to this one right here on the side. We're not actually even going to use this one. In fact, what I usually do is we can either take it off completely or turn it down just so no liquid, like water, over time accumulates in there, and it'll just act like a vent, basically. If you are using a wastegate, consult your wastegate manufacturer as far as how to hook it up, or a boost control rather. Consult the boost control manufacturer as far as how to hook it up. Some of them will be normally open and some will be normally closed, and that'll vary depending on which of these, or if you use both of them for your setup. But for the standard, just bolting it on, just one simple line goes directly from the turbo on each side to this here. Now another thing to note, if you are using a boost controller setup, you do need to tee the two turbos together first, then run it to your boost controller, then out of your boost controller, tee it, split them back apart, and run to the wastegates. That ensures that no one side is seeing any more boost, response, or pressure than the other side, that they are actually seeing the exact same thing. Otherwise, you'll have one wastegate opening before the other, and then they'll start to fight each other in terms of trying to compensate. Alright, next up we're going to show you how to make the spark plug wires. Now when you get the kit, the spark plug wires are complete and they're pretty long. The end that's on them, it's a little red end, you're just going to cut that completely off. Essentially the whole kit, because you can essentially make the plug wires as long as you want, in case you want to do any special routing with them, if you want to run them up over through the top of the engine or through any looms or anything like that. The size that we make them to, though, is just going to be at 24 inches in length. So what you're going to do is cut both ends off so it looks like that, and 24 inches long. And that size will work for all of them. Next thing you can do is you can come back about 3/4 of an inch and using a stripper cut it off. Now you can actually see in the middle of the fibers is the carbon core of the spark plug wire there. So we're going to trim just the fibers off of here. They look like little hairs, just get them out of the way. And what you should be ended up with is just the carbon core, right like that. Alright, now there's two different types of ends that you're going to get with these wires. One is going to be the bigger, fatter coil end, and the other one is going to be the skinnier spark plug end. Now with the coil end, it's easiest if you take and slide this rubber onto the wire first. With the coil end, you do that second. I'm sorry, with the spark plug end, you do that second. The coil end, slide the rubber on first, pull the wire through, and you're actually going to work with the wire coming through this, and put your crimp on, and then just slide the rubber back over the top. With the spark plug side, which we're going to do second, it's easiest just to install the metal crimp onto it first, and then slide the rubber on the top of it until you can see it down inside the hole where it lines up, where it'll actually lock on to the spark plug. Now what you're going to do first, we're going to start with the coil end, which is going to be this one here. Now, it kind of looks like the longer end here is where the wire is supposed to go, but it's not. That's actually what's going to feed down inside of your spark plug. So you're going to slide your rubber black piece on first, your boot, and you're going to slide that down so that this is protruding out through it. Then take the carbon, fill it back over on top of itself like this, and slide that on so that way it's actually pinched in there and it's folded over completely. And then you simply just crimp the two sides down. And what I usually do is crimp them down to where they actually bite into the plug wire and pinch it, kind of like that. And then when we crimp it again this way, it'll actually stab into the wire. That way it kind of bites onto the silicone rubber coating of the wire itself. And then that's pretty much it there. Now it's actually bit down in and sticking to it with a carbon on the backside. Then you're going to take your rubber connector for the end and just slide it back up over the top of it. I'm out of rubber connectors for these because we actually already have the wires made, but then you'll slide this back into place. So the other side that we're going to do next is the side that actually connects to the spark plug. On this one, you just leave the rubber piece off first. We'll add that in at the end, and you're just going to again take and clip this about 3/4 of an inch back. Same thing, expose the carbon core wire. Clip off all the little fibers that hold the silicone together. So again, you're left with just the carbon core sticking out. Now again, you're going to take this and you're going to fold it over on there like that and slide it in so that again, you can see it folded over on the top there. Exact same concept with this one is you just pinch the two pieces down here and crimp it in there. And again, like I said, I usually get it to stab in there. If you crimp it like that first, so it's squished down in there and then stabs right into it. And if you look, if the autofocus will work, and then do the same thing to the other side. And ta-da, that's installed. Now for this one, the black rubber boot will just slide directly into there, and essentially you're going to slide this in until it's facing up like that, so that way when you plug it on, it'll actually make good connection. It's best before you actually try to stick these in the car, take a spark plug out and play with them and check and make sure that you actually have it all the way in and facing in the right position. You should hear a little click lock on it when it works. Now we're going to go ahead and install the spark plug wires. Now this is the coil side, and it will plug under the coil, and it comes out the bottom of the coil, but it's actually going to point up. Generally these are going to plug onto the spark plug. With the 90 degree, it's going to go down. So when you get it installed, it should look something like this, and it's going to loop completely around the header itself. Alright, so here you can see we've got the spark plug wires all installed. Now on the passenger side here, they're all going to come and loop around, and they're going to go back, and like I said, they're going to be coming up on the bottom from an angle like this. Biggest thing is make sure that they're off of the downpipe. Now the front one on the passenger side is going to run a little different because there's obviously not enough clearance room to make it through here. So that one's going to come directly forward and go down, and same thing, it's just going to come up from the bottom and plug in. Over here on the passenger side, he's putting the last of the zip tie on, and again what we do over on this side over here is actually zip tie it up out of the way. You can see one of them there to the brake lines. Just kind of hold them so that they don't ever fall down onto the downpipe. This side here is going to be the exact same thing. They're all coming right up off of there, go down on around it, and then just loop under from the bottom. Again, make sure you got plenty clearance room, that they're not touching on the exhaust. Next, what we're going to work on is the oil feed line. This is what's going to supply the turbo with the oil and feed them. This is your oil feed block here, and you're going to screw your dash 4 and 90 degree fitting right into it. Now if you look down right by your oil filter on your driver's side here, there's going to be a block that looks very similar to this. It's got two 10mm bolts in it. We'll go ahead and pull those out. This is a sandwich plate block that's going to slide in between that, and then the existing one's going to slap back on top of it here. Again, with this one now, we're going to just use some RTV sealant to help seal it up. I'm going to go ahead and install it now, and then we'll show you some pictures of it when we're done, what it looks like, and which direction you should have this AN fitting facing, so that way we can get the oil line on it. This is the piece that we removed right next to the oil filter, and this is what's going to cap it. Now there's two studs with nuts that are holding this in there, but the studs are not going to be long enough. So we removed the nuts, we pulled this piece off, and now what we're going to do is we're going to actually shore this up, because once we put our sandwich plate in here, it's going to be a little bit too long to actually fit the nuts and the studs on. So let's go ahead and shave this down now. We're just going to use a standard cutoff wheel on this, and we cut it right about in half. Now what we've done, if you see how fat it was, and we've shaved it down and it's nice and flat there, so that way it's going to be a little bit skinnier. We can fit this on there once we do put our sandwich plate in place. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side now. Alright, right here, you can see where we've installed the sandwich plate now, with the AN fitting pointing out and away from the oil filter. And you can see the little cap where we modified it, so now that the nuts will actually fit back up on top of it. And then that's going to point slightly forward and slightly away, and that's where we're going to tap into and take our oil feed from. So we'll go ahead and install the oil lines on there next. Right here you can see we tapped in the oil line, and then we fed it directly up. Now you're going to want to make sure you steer clear of the sway bar that's right there, and then of course the accessory drive pulleys for the alternator and the whole front of the engine. The oil feed line is going to come right there. I'm going to feed the driver's side turbo first, and it's just going to go straight into it with the T fitting. From there you got the 90-degree fitting that comes out, tucks it under the AC line here, right across the front. And then it comes back over and drops down and feeds the passenger side turbo here. And that's pretty much all there is for the oil feed line. Next we're going to install the intercooler. Now the intercooler is actually going to sit right in here where the bumper impact bumper here is. This one's already been cut out because we previously used this for an install. I'm just going to come back and kind of show you. Now on this bumper here we cut it out too much, so we're going to show you kind of how to go about measuring it correctly. The easiest way is get yourself a set of roll of masking tape. Just run one piece of tape between the two headlights. Now what this is going to do is give you a nice straight edge here. So you can take your magic marker out and just run it down and mark along the bumper. Or you can even come back with the masking tape and run a different line looking from the top down. And run that right across there. Now essentially everything in the green here that's still left on the front bumper we're going to keep, and everything behind that we're going to need to get rid of. You're going to need to cut it out back up to where these posts are, and I'll show you that in just a minute once we get it off the car. So we're going to go ahead and remove it now. Alright, now we got the bumper off the car. You can see our tape line here. This is where we're supposed to cut it. Like I said before, this one we already pre-cut out, and we actually trimmed way too much off. If you go straight and just a straight cut, that's going to be the best fit for it. So what you're going to do is you're going to take and you're going to cut in here. Usually a Sawzall works the best, and then come back on the top and the bottom and use a cutoff wheel and cut in here and here, and then you can actually put the Sawzall blade in there and run it all the way down. So basically you're going to remove that chunk from there. Now the part that you're going to have to cut down, you need to get it as close to these studs as you possibly can in order for it to clear. So we're going to cut 2 notches down. Like I said, you come in here with this cutoff wheel, cut here and here, and then you could stick the Sawzall blade essentially right in here and just run it all the way through. And you're going to make sure you cut through both layers of the bumper. So what you end up with, it should look like a lot like this side over here, and it's just cut flush. Now that we've notched it out and made enough clearance room here for the intercooler itself, we're going to need to actually come in and make enough room for the intercooler piping. Now this is where it bolts up, and the frame rail sits directly here. We're actually going to go through the frame rail under the light, and that's where our intercooler piping is going to go. So what we need to do next is come in and chop and cut around here. You can see I've already done it on this side over here, and we just opened it up. And basically all we did is made a cut here, made the cut here, and then we notched around to keep enough room so we can still keep this stud in here for structure. This is actually where the intercooler piping is going to protrude through. And then I didn't actually cut it out. We just fold it back in, the easiest, and then just fold it in here, and that way it kind of opens it up and widens it up, and so you can get the piping in there. This might be a kind of a trial and error thing. You have to set the intercooler in there and then see how much room you got to work where you can squeeze and negotiate the piping in here. We might come back and actually round this down as well, just so there's not a sharp edge that's going to be rubbing and poking the intercooler piping. Alright, next we're going to go ahead and install the intercooler itself. Now to prepare for that, what you want to do is install both of the blow-off valves. The holes and everything have already been cut and tapped for you. The orientation you're going to have it is so that the big outlet pipe is facing towards the passenger side of the car, and then the 2 mounting brackets are going to be facing towards the car itself. So it's going to sit on there like that. That way your horns are both facing forward and out, and you should be able to see them a little bit through the grill as soon as we get done. Now we're going to mount both of them on there. They're just two M6 1.0 Allen head bolts that you can see are on there. And those bolt up pretty easily. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the power steering line cooler here. And just go ahead and get rid of both these brackets. You won't need them anymore. Now we're actually going to come back and mount this directly to the frame of the body here on the radiator sub-support, and just kind of finagle it and push it back in there so it's out of the way. That way we're not going to hit on rub on the backside of the intercooler. Okay, so for mounting this, we're just going to use one of the supplied hose clamps with one of the self-tapping screws, and basically just pin it up on here, and then just run your self-tapping screw through down. That'll hold this nice and secure and snug in here so it's not bouncing around and vibrating. Okay, next up we're going to go ahead and install the intercooler itself. And you're just going to take the two intercooler mounting brackets with the M10 1.5 bolts and the nuts. And just go ahead and thread them on so it's nice and still loose. That way it's going to give us a little bit of playroom on it when we go to actually install it. Do the same thing on the other side. We're going to mount the intercooler with the brackets to the headlight housings here. So you're going to remove both of these 10mm bolts here. Now these are going to be too short. So we're going to use the M6 1.0 by 40mm bolts, and these are going to be a little bit longer to help attach this. Now if you look, we actually had to trim out with a pair of dikes. There's a little bit of plastic that'll overhang, which will now not allow the black bracket to hang exactly straight down. So what we do is just come in with a pair of dikes, and you can kind of clip the plastic back like this and like that until there's enough room that the intercooler bracket will be able to hang exactly vertical coming up from here. Now again, everything's still kind of loose, so that'll give us enough playroom where we can shift it around from side to side as we need. But it looks pretty good and pretty centered right there, so we're going to go ahead and tighten it up. Okay, next up what we need to do is modify the frame rails to make room for the clearance on the intercooler piping that's going to be coming through right here. And this little flat piece here is in the way. So what we're going to do is take our saw, and you're going to cut right here and right here, just back to where about the second layer of it starts there. And then you can really just take this by hand and push it down. Again, we're not going to cut it completely off. We're just going to move it out of the way. That's going to give clearancing for our pipe that's actually going to come and sit right through here now. Alright, now as far as the intercooler piping, the left and the right are going to be somewhat symmetrical as far as in terms of what pipes go on them. We're going to start off with a 45-degree silicone coupler. That's going to attach to your turbo. Then the 90-degree aluminum bend and a 2-inch is going to attach to that, and then finally the 2.5 to 2-inch 45-degree coupler is going to attach to that. Now when you look at it, and it actually comes through the frame rail, it's going to be pointed downward like this. It's not going to come through perfectly and made up to the intercooler. That's why we have the 45 on there. So it actually should be coming at a slight downward angle like this as it comes through our frame rail, and then we bring it back up into place with this 45-degree angle here. Okay, here you can see this is the passenger side turbo. We've got our 45-degree coupler. It comes down. Again, notice how this is slanting downward at an angle here. And then it slants back upward into the 45-degree reducer. Both sides are going to be, like I said, again, they're symmetrical. It's going to be the same thing. Now the output orientation on the turbo is slightly different because one is pointing straight horizontal and then the other one actually points at a diagonal. But the 45 pretty much mates up to it the same way and slides it right under the headlight housing there. Next we're going to be able to go in and do the upper intercooler and the main pipe to it, but this coolant radiator hose here is going to be in the way. So we're going to go ahead and remove that. Hang on to the hose clamps for now, but just go ahead and discard the hose as you won't be needing it. Alright, next up, in order to clear for the intercooler piping, which is going to be actually coming up here on our driver's side and coming across, we need to trim the fan shroud down a little bit. So what we need to do first is disconnect the electrical, and then the thing should slide out. It's pretty much just latched in the little latches. Alright, now that we have the radiator assembly out, or the fan assembly rather, on the driver's side one, the outermost leg, which looks basically just like one of these here, you're actually going to need to trim off. And that was right here. And basically we just shaved it flat. Now if you look, there's actually two different dimensions as far as the height on the fan assembly. There's a lower one and a higher one. And across the whole driver's side here, we just shaved that down. We cut it out. We'll go ahead and clean it up now with a grinding wheel just to smooth it out and make it look a little flush. But basically the pipe's going to come right straight across here. And make sure you don't grind too low to where you're actually going to hit the fan blade. If you'll notice, on all the spots on this, we're still up above the fan blade. That way our intercooler piping that is coming through here has no chance of rubbing on the fan. Alright, you can see here how we've notched it out now. We've clipped it down below, taken off the outer ring, and like I said, we're making it flush and even with the shorter ring that's already there. But make sure you leave enough that you're not actually going below the area where the fan is going to be moving there. See how the fan's still recessed down inside there? You don't want to shave too much off. And then the one leg that's going to hold the fan on this side right here that comes and attaches over here, we just cleaned all that off, and that's going to provide enough room for our intercooler pipe to run right up through here. Alright, now here on the floor I've got the basic layout of the intercooler design. We're going to start off with a 3-inch coupler coming out down here into our bend, 90 degree, then a 90 degree bend coupler into our long pipe, which comes up to a reducer that goes 3 to 3.5 to here, and that's where our mass air meter is going to start. From there it's just one last coupler, the 90 degree bend, the 4-inch right there, and that's going to take us into our throttle body. Alright, now we've got pretty much most of the upper intercooler piping installed. You can see though how it sags down just a little bit, and that's what these two aluminum brackets here are going to be for. We're actually going to put these between the radiator core support and the little subframe behind it there. You're going to attach it with the self-tapping screws, basically just screwed in. Since it is aluminum, it will form fit and it should kind of bend around the pipe as you screw it in. They won't be straight when you get done, and that's just kind of a bracket to help hold and support the pipe up so it doesn't fall out of there or it doesn't scrape on anything. Tucks it up in there nice and tight while you're driving. Alright, here's going to be a view of the two intercooler straps holding the intercooler piping. Now as you can see, like I said, they're not going to be straight. They will bend and form fit around the pipe, but that holds it up in there nice and secure. Shouldn't rattle, vibrate around, or go anywhere now. And again, we just tapped it into there and then into the little subframe piece right here. Alright, the last thing that we're going to replace is going to be the coolant pipe that we took out earlier, the upper radiator hose. Now your 90 degree fitting is going to go on the driver's side to the radiator. The 45 degree fitting is going to go on the engine side. And as far as the aluminum pipe, the 90 degree fitting and then the 45. So your two 90s will be touching and your two 45 degrees will be touching. And it basically slides right in place of the stock one. Should come up right across the front, and the top here just in front of the intercooler. Alright, here you can see the mass air meter, the intercooler piping, and the upper radiator hose completely installed. Everything's ready to roll on this. It reduces down there. Now you need to be careful, make sure that you got enough clearance room between the power steering pump and the alternator for the intercooler piping here that you're not going to rub on it at all. Once you get it in there and cleared and tighten everything up, everything should be pretty stout and stable where it's not going to move around. I mean, you can grab it and shake it pretty good. That way nothing rubs in the future. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and install the front bumper core support. On the other side, the horn bolts up just fine. This is the side we took the horn off because the oil return pump's in the way. So what we're going to do is take this bracket that's attached to it off, so we have just the horn assembly by itself, and then it'll bolt right into the factory location here of for the 2 bolts that are going to hold on the actual bumper support itself. And then just plug it back in. And that's all bolted up. And you can see the radiator assembly. And again, the intercooler pipes are going to go right in there where we notched it out, and right up through the frame rail there. Here is the factory one on this side, and it just bolts up just like normal. Next, we'll go ahead and install the fuel injectors. It's pretty simple and straightforward. There's just 4 10mm bolts. You remove those 4, lift the fuel rail up, and just slide the new injector in. The one thing you want to watch out for is that you don't pinch the O-ring on the top of the injector when you're sliding it into the fuel rail. A lot of times it helps to put a little bit of lubrication on it just to slide it in there. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and show you the vacuum line routing on here. First up is going to be the hose that generally goes to the just before the throttle body. That one you can just go ahead and disconnect, get rid of. We just push the hose down. The second one's a little bit harder to see, and it's actually making a horseshoe right there. That's going to go from behind the throttle body to the valley of the intake manifold there. That's just going basically to your crankcase. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect that. The bottom part, we're just going to leave it vent to atmosphere, and then the top part is going to be our source. The top nipple there going to the intake manifold is going to be our source for vacuum and boost. So we're going to run that actually out. We're going to split it into a T and run it to both of the blow-off valves. Then if you have a boost gauge or a meth kit or a fuel system or anything that requires a boost reference, that's also where you're going to take it from. And there you have it. That's pretty much a complete UPP Twin Turbo GTO kit install from start to finish. So only a couple more things we have left is going to be just basically install the front bumper. The front bumper shouldn't require any modifications. It should just slide right over, fit up and bolt up just as if it were factory. And then the exhaust, which we're going to actually put it on the lift to show you that. Alright, for the last part here, we're going to install the exhaust and mate it up to your existing exhaust. Now, depending on your skill level, you can either do this yourself or you can send it away to any exhaust shop. You'll be able to do this really simply. You'll notice the downpipes end right here, and we send you the additional V-band ring with it and the V-band clamps. The V-bands will actually just clamp right up to the existing downpipe here. So what we need to do is mate them to your existing exhaust. So what you can do is hold your exhaust up into place, and then just give it a little mark right here where you're going to cut it. Now the front section of this we're going to go ahead and discard, and the rear section, when you cut it, is where the V-band gets welded on, and then it will actually bolt right into place here. There are variances between the different exhausts if you got aftermarket and that, but these downpipes actually have the flex sections in them, which give them a fair amount of playroom. They should be able to mate up to pretty much whatever you've got. Now if you are using the stock exhaust, or if you're using 2.5-inch aftermarket exhaust, you'll notice the downpipes and the V-bands are all 3-inch. So once you cut this, you need to take it to an exhaust shop and actually have it expanded out, so that way it fits and it takes up the full inside of the V-band here, and you can slide it right on, weld it in place, and once you do that, it should bolt up. And I do recommend welding it while it's on the car, just that way if there's any angles or any shifting of it, you can account for that, tack it in place, pull it down, weld it up. That's pretty much what it entails for this. So basically we try to get them centered up with where the factory exhaust is coming through here, and then you're just going to cut it, put the V-band on in its place, and weld it in.